I woke up slowly, surrounded by a pleasant perfume, my head lying on her satiny soft lap. Sleepily, I opened my eyes. My beautiful wife was gazing down at me, smiling tenderly. The lace from her peignoir sleeve trailed across my face as she pushed some of my hair that had fallen over my brow back from my face. "Hello, sleepyhead," she purred. "Have a nice nap?" I smiled back up at her. "Oh yes," I replied, then yawned. "You smell awfully nice," I said. "Is that a new perfume you're trying?" She looked puzzled for a second, then smiled down at me again. "Oh no, dear. It's probably this new cream I'm trying on you. It does smell lovely, doesn't it?" As she said this, her cool fingers stroked my brow and around my eyes, and I could feel the smoothness of the face cream she was working into my skin. Then I remembered. She'd been concerned about the state of my skin some days earlier and had suggested some cream that she thought highly of. Since then she had been trying it out along with various other products. Just as I'd been slipping off into napland, I'd been laying on my back, with my head on her lap. Had fallen asleep as she'd worked her ministrations into my skin. "It's kind of perfumey, is it not?" I asked, a little concern crossing my mind. "Well, maybe a little bit. But don't you want to smell nice for me?" She chided me gently. "I mean," she continued, "I make myself feel all nice and soft and pretty for you, don't I? Surely you don't mind smelling just a teensy wee bit nice for me, eh?" What could I say? I smiled back up at her, and let her fingers continue their sweet-smelling massage. Dreamily, I looked up at the draped material that surrounded our canopied bed. The white, soft fabrics that seemed to cover but didn't exactly extinguish, the pastel pinks and blues, the sheen of the satins used. From the corner of my eye, I could see the sweep of her lace-enclosed arm as it moved gently, massaging the creams and lotions into my skin, the lace matching the textures on the cushions and pillows that surrounded us on the bed. The whole room was different since Ellen had married me. It was so nice now. From nowhere, Rose appeared in my vision. Her pretty oval face framed by her jet black hair, topped with a pristine white lace cap. It dropped out of my vision momentarily as she bobbed a quick curtsy. "Miss Ellen," she was saying, "Mr. Henry's cousins are here. Should I bring them upstairs?" Ellen smiled down on me. "Isn't that nice? Do you feel like some company? To tell the truth, darling?" "I really don't," I protested mildly. "And where is this stuff coming from that they're my cousins? I've no recollection." "Hush, Henry," she whispered, putting a gentle finger on my lips. "What would these poor girls think if they heard you? The resemblance is so noticeable. I mean, you could all be sisters. The same shape face, the same coloring." She teased me by giving my tummy a little pinch, the same plumpness. I couldn't help it. I giggled a little. If you and Rose would stop feeding me all these chocolates and stuff, I might be in better shape. Ellen interrupted me. "Talking of that, Rose? Give Henry one of these chocolate truffles, please. He hasn't had one in such a long time. He must be getting hungry. As sweets?" And, lying soft and submissive in my wife's loving arms, I lazily ingested a rich dark chocolate truffle that her maid put to my lips. I said. "These are so good." Rose smiled down on me, then brought a paper napkin from somewhere and carefully wiped my mouth. Her expression was hard to read, but then from nowhere another chocolate appeared in her hand in front of my mouth. I really didn't want it. Started to say so, but closed my lips together when she tried to take advantage of my open mouth. She then did something that amazed me, started applying the soft chocolate to my lips as if she was putting lipstick on me, smiling tenderly all the while. "Oh, isn't that cute?" Ellen laughed. "I think that brown lipstick would suit you, dear. Hurry up and eat that chocolate though, darling. Rose has to go and show your guests up." As she said this, she used one hand to squeeze my cheeks to open my mouth. Rose then placed the chocolate on my tongue, then wiped my lips with the napkin again, curtsied and left. My mouth was full so I couldn't talk, but I jumped at the sharp pain in one of my eyebrows. I jumped. "Oh!" I moaned, and put my hand up to stop her. "For goodness sake! Ellen said sharply. Will you behave? I'm only plucking an eyebrow hair or two. That's what you say every time, I managed to mumble, but I'm not going to have any left if you keep plucking them. Don't be silly, she said. Don't tell me you want big hairy eyebrows like ugly caterpillars. That's not what I meant, ow. I squealed as she plucked another. Please, Ellen? Don't do any more. Please? Just a few more, she said, plucking another. And stop being such a baby, as she removed another. I must have lost at least a dozen eyebrow hairs by the time Rose showed Emily and Francis, my supposed cousins, into our bedroom. Still in bed at this time of the day? What slugabeds you two are, Francis said, smiling as she and her sister advanced to sit beside me on the bed, Francis to the right, Emily to the left. As usual, both were dressed in a very feminine style, long floral dresses with chiffon sleeves, and large, beribboned straw hats. They both peered down at me. Was it you making that yowling noise we just heard? Emily asked. Yes, Ellen answered for me. The big sissy is yelling and carrying on, just because I'm plucking an eyebrow hair or two. Men are such babies, aren't they? Francis asked. Yes. You'd think they'd want to look nice, Emily agreed. Fancy making all of that noise for a couple of little hairs. But I suppose we should get up. Ellen sighed. Rose? Before you leave, would you get Mr. Henry's new robe from the closet? The pearl one, I think. What new robe? I asked, raising myself up from her lap, grateful that she wasn't plucking any more of my eyebrow hairs. Oh, I just had a couple made for you. I'm so tired of seeing you in that ratty old plaid thing. But I like it, I complained. Don't be difficult. Please, she said firmly. I had these made, especially for you. Go and try that one on. Nonplussed, I looked at the garment Rose was bringing to me. I couldn't make out the details, but it looked extremely feminine. You're kidding. I can't wear that. I complained. You're just being difficult, Henry. Of course you can. Rose, help Mr. Henry put it on. She then turned her attention back to me. I had it copied from an old robe that Joan Crawford wore in one of her movies, Mildred Pierce I think it was. Just wait, you're going to love it. You'll see. Oh, if it's modeled on one of hers, it can't be too feminine, Emily said. The big masculine padded shoulders, all boxy looking. While she was talking, Rose was helping me into the garment. There was nothing masculine I could see about it, and I blushed furiously as Rose helped me into it, addressing my wife as she did so. This is really nice, Miss Ellen. You have such wonderful taste. She turned to my cousins. You can't see it properly, but the base of this garment is a very pale blue, sleeveless taffeta tunic. Taffeta! For goodness sake! I'm not. I bleated Henry. Will you stop that noise? I'm starting to lose my patience. Ellen said. If you don't, I'll have Rose take over your training. She won't put up with too much of your nonsense. His training? Emily asked. Yes. We came to the conclusion that he had far too many rough masculine edges. We're trying to teach him to recognize his internal woman. Isn't that correct, Henry? Yes. But, darling, I saw that Ellen had stopped paying attention to me. Look, girls. Isn't that the nicest waistband? She was commenting. And ladies, Rose was saying as she fastened. Over the base tunic is a fine layer of transparent silk, and over that is 2 layers of chiffon, one pale pink, the other pale blue. That's what provides the pearl tone. The waistband Ellen had referred to as pink in color, quite wide, with a vertical row of small, fabric-covered blue buttons. Rose's nimble fingers were securing them rapidly. Oh yes, Miss Ellen, the waistband is lovely. See, ladies, how it basically forces the breasts up a little, then accentuates the skirt? Which you'll see has 6 layers of different pastel chiffon. Would you pirouette, Mr. Henry? Let the ladies see the skirt properly. Please. Red and ashamed, I turned slowly in front of the women. That's far too slow, Henry. Do it again. Twirl a little faster, Ellen commanded. There, that's a lot better. And now, totally enclosed in a feminine robe, I acted the model's role, totally immobilized by Emily and Frances taking hold of my cuffs and securing each with 5 buttons matching those at the waist. Both of them plucked admiringly at the sleeves when they had finished. These cuffs might need taking in, Ellen, Frances said. Oh, grief, Ellen said, coming over to me and looking at the fit. Yes. He does have very dainty wrists. Rose examined them as well. Oh, you don't need to take them back to the boutique, Miss Ellen. I could do that in a jiffy. Ellen beamed. Wonderful. Aw, come on, Ellen, I complained. Look at the skirt and the buttons, for goodness sake. And these fluffed out sleeves? They're transparent. This is a woman's robe. Well, maybe it is, she retorted, but you've got such nice arms, and this way you show them to advantage. She turned to the other two. Don't you agree, girls? Ellen had been making a fuss over my arms since we'd met. They're very white, almost hairless, and without any definitive muscle. She had bought me some pajamas, all silk, all sleeveless, so that she could appreciate them all the more. The selfsame arms were now being shown off within blouse sleeves of chiffon, ending in the satin cuffs. Oh yes. Lovely. Emily gushed. Well, he is right. It's not a very masculine robe, Frances added, but it does look nice on you, Henry. Then she added, and Ellen's right too. Your arms are one of your nice features. You should show them off a little. With that, she lifted the hem of my robe to disclose my pajama pant legs. She enthused. I hadn't really noticed them before, but doesn't Elaine's boutique have a similar pair of pajamas on a mannequin in the window? Oh yes, Ellen replied. I used to buy a lot of my stuff at Elaine's. Now I get his lounging wear from her. I was totally lost. Everything seemed to be happening too rapidly. My wife was talking as if I was some kind of a doll for her to dress and play with. My confusion wasn't reduced when she added, I'm so glad you've come just now, girls. You'll be nice company for Henry, and it'll give me a chance to get some important stuff done on the computer. Henry, darling, why don't you escort our guests downstairs? Rose? Why don't you make up a light lunch for everyone? I'll be down to join you in an hour or so. Rose curtsied and left the room. Frances took my arm. That's a wonderful idea, Ellen. Come on, Henry. You can show us what you and Ellen have been up to with the house. And, her arm in mine, I was being led out of the bedroom. But I almost tripped, my foot catching on the hem of my new robe. Ellen noticed. Oh dear, she exclaimed. I was afraid of that. Thank goodness I thought of these. As she spoke, she was walking to her closet and then started rummaging in there. Pulled out a shoebox and opened it up. Horror-struck, I saw the flamboyant high-heeled backless slippers she was holding out and carrying to me. See, darling? They'll be just perfect with your outfit. Not only that, they'll stop you from tripping on it, and even though the heels aren't too high, you'll be a little taller. Here, try them on. But, darling, for goodness sake, they're women's. Yes, of course they are. Not too many pairs of men's high-heeled slippers around, are there? As she said this, she was kneeling down, lifting each foot in turn and slipping the slippers on. Oh, how cute! Emily gushed. The perfect finishing touch. Perfect, Ellen said happily. Just perfect. Now, Henry, off you go with your friends. Have a nice maiden voyage in your shoes. All three women giggled at the inference. Frances still had a hold of my arm. Helplessly, I let her lead me out of the room and downstairs. There, she disengaged and allowed me to show her and Emily all of the recent redecorating that Ellen had imposed on the house. Surprisingly, the shoes hardly affected my walking at all, made my stride a little shorter perhaps. My robe seemed to waft around me a lot more, I thought, but I wasn't sure. In a way, I actually enjoyed the additional height the slippers provided. Looking at everything through my companion's eyes, I had to admit that Ellen had made some fantastic changes in a short time. The house had been in my family for generations, although I had never stayed there, except for the odd vacation or visit to my grandfather. I had been orphaned at an early age, but he had never really seemed to care for me personally, shifting me off to one school or another, and always somewhat uncomfortable in my presence. We had no other relatives that I knew of, so that explained why I had been the sole recipient of his estate and not inconsiderable sum involving the large house, real estate, and stock holdings. Ellen had been the lawyer I'd hired to contest some of the silly strictures he tried to impose on the inheritance, how much I was to get each year, how I couldn't make any decisions, that sort of thing. She was highly aggressive, brilliant, and gorgeous. She made mincemeat of my grandfather's old fuddy-duddy lawyers. It seemed the wise thing to do afterwards when I made her my financial advisor. After we fell in love, I was delighted when she gave up her law practice to handle my affairs. The house had gone from being a comfortable old house, lots of brick and walnut furniture, to a bright, open, rather feminine place with lots of chintzes, pastels, and particularly flowers. Both Emily and Frances were suitably impressed, constantly admiring my taste. I tried to let them know it was all Ellen's doing, but this point seemed to escape them. Finally, I just took all the credit. I was never too sure where my cousins had come from, but, according to Ellen, they did pose some sort of threat to contest the will. They didn't seem to be aware of this, both of them being ultra-feminine and dithery, but, again taking Ellen's advice, I put myself out to be pleasant to them. When we got back to the sitting room, Rose reappeared carrying a tray with chocolates. Both Emily and Frances declined. I did too. Rose stared at me, a slightly intimidating look in her eye. Didn't the mistress suggest that you eat more chocolate, Miss Henry? I'm Mr. Henry, Rose. How often do I have to tell you? I said firmly. She curtsied. I'm so sorry, sir, she said, but her eyes weren't overly apologetic. But, she continued, if you don't want to follow Miss Ellen's diet? Maybe you should tell her, or would you rather that I did? Oh, for goodness sake. Give me one. I don't understand what all this fuss is about. With that, I took one from the tray and put it in my mouth. Rose continued to stand there, the tray extended. Well? I said huffily. Maybe another, she suggested. Ellen only makes me eat one at this time. Lunch will be pretty soon and I don't want to ruin my appetite, I said defensively. You know that the mistress put me in charge when she's not here. I think you should have another one. Shamefaced at this maid's bossiness, I took one and ate it. That'll be all, Rose, I said huffily. Off with you. She paused for just long enough to frighten me into thinking that she was going to force me to eat another chocolate, but then curtsied deferentially. Yes, Miss Henry, she said, and left the room. Well, I never, Emily said. Oh, she's just doing what Ellen tells her. I wouldn't want to get her in any trouble. I made excuses for Rose. Trouble? Why should she get in trouble? The care she takes of you. I think she's wonderful. Never seen a servant like her, she added. I let a big breath slowly out. I'd almost made a complete fool of myself. Where I was seeing a servant who had far too much to say for herself, my two cousins only saw a maid who was totally wrapped up in her employer's welfare. Shortly afterwards, Rose called us to lunch, telling us that the mistress would join us shortly. We sat in the dining room alcove, me with my back to the window, a cousin on each side. Rose poured us all a glass of white wine, then left. Frances leaned over to her sister. Wow, that Rose is quite a hunk. Isn't she? Oh yes. I kinda wondered about her, Emily answered. A hunk? I asked. What are you two talking about? Frances blushed deeply. I'm terribly sorry, Henry. I just have the feeling that Rose has, know what? Masculine tendencies. I really forgot there for a minute that you weren't a man. Even thought you might fancy her yourself? I sat there looking at her blankly. Then it dawned on me. This woman was asking me if I'd ever fancy being Rose's girlfriend. I couldn't answer. Just blushed enough to get the girls giggling. The table, as usual, was set beautifully. The floral napkins, the silverware, the gleaming crystal, the bright floral centerpiece. Ellen swept into the room a few minutes later. She still wore the nightdress and peignoir she'd worn earlier. Again, I was struck by how beautiful she was, her long auburn hair tied loosely at the back of her neck with a lace tie, her dark eyes, her air of absolute confidence. She leaned over the table and kissed my cheek, then sat opposite me. "How sweet you all look," chattering away like little magpies. "Having a good time, girls?" Obviously she had to be talking to my two companions, but she was looking directly at me. The other two gushed something, but Ellen continued to look at me as if expecting my response as well. She cocked her head to one side slightly as if to say, "Well?" "Oh yes, Ellen. It's been fun," I managed. She smiled sweetly. "I think you like to just sit and gossip with the girls. But I think it's time we ate now. All right, girls?" And I nodded in abject obedience. From where I sat, I could see the group reflected in a mirror across the room. All of a sudden I realized just how feminine a picture it showed. Silks and laces and chiffons, gleams of satin. Even Rose in her soft black uniform with the white apron and cap added to the picture as she moved quietly around serving our meal. Nervously, I swept my hair back from my forehead. It was getting quite long. I was going to need Ellen's okay to get it cut. It hadn't been too bad when I'd been able to tie it back in a ponytail, but Ellen had objected, so now it just hung loose, naturally wavy. When I looked at it, it was almost exactly the same as Emily's. And with a shock, my eyes got drawn to the mirror by the flash of a chiffon sleeve as it pushed the hair back from the face of a young woman and knew it was me I was seeing. "Yes. Your hair is probably getting a little long. Time we did something with it," Ellen said. I could only stare at her in astonishment. Was mind reading amongst her accomplishments? But her next words dispelled any idea I had of being allowed to get a haircut. "Rose? Why don't you work on Francis, Emily and Henry's hair after lunch?" Then she added, "Rose is very good with hair. You'll really love what she can do." Both of my cousins gave little squeals of delight. "Oh, she does yours, doesn't she?" Emily asked Ellen. "And your hair is always so immaculate." "Oh, thank you, thank you." And 30 minutes later, I sat in front of the dressing table with Rose doing my hair, showing Emily and Francis some tricks of the trade, and sometimes allowing them to practice a little on me. I never stopped blushing the whole time through the shampoo, the blow drying, the application of rollers and bobby pins and setting lotion, then being placed under the portable dryer. Worse was to follow. As Rose then started working on Emily's hair, Francis decided to give me a manicure. Helpless with the dryer hood fastened around my hair, I could only stare in fascination as my fingernails were transformed into a bright scarlet color. What could I do? The girls were having a marvelous time, orchestrated by Rose. If I argued or desisted in any way, it was like throwing a wet blanket on everyone else's fun. In addition, I was well aware that since wakening from my nap I had crossed some sort of nebulous border between masculine and feminine and now resided in a kind of state where I was the only one with any memory of me ever being considered masculine, and even that was fading as I looked in the mirror and saw the feminine creature in the chiffon robe, arching eyebrows, scarlet fingernails. Things, believe it or not, got worse. I was finally released from the dryer, only to discover that I was now in the position of Rose's assistant working to beautify Emily and Francis. First of all I had to shampoo Francis' hair, then, under Rose's eagle eye, had to roll her hair up in large pink rollers, pinning them in place. I couldn't refuse. I became an integral part of the whole scene, a group of women prettifying each other. What choice had I? To claim any kind of manliness at that stage was patently ridiculous and, truthfully, it wasn't too difficult for me to merge into the picture as I wafted from one task to the other, finding it easier and easier to chatter and gossip by the minute. I couldn't be certain, but a few times I seemed to feel a hand caress a sleeve or my backside. Wasn't sure who it was coming from. Then I heard the maid's bell chime. The only thing was that the summons was for me. Ellen had explained that Rose took offense at this time-honored way of calling a maid, and, as she had a lot of the little handbells, it was an awful waste not to use them for something. Accordingly, they had become the signal that I was wanted by my spouse. Horror-struck I heard Emily say to Rose, "Is that Ellen calling you?" And Rose replying, Oh no. That's for Miss Henry. Francis laughed emitted a shrill giggle. You keep calling him Miss Henry? Rose shrugged her pretty shoulders. I know. But it's a natural mistake, don't you think? Then she grinned at me. Mistress wants you. Better get going, eh? I can't go like this. I protested. Don't see why not, Rose replied. And I'd hurry if I were you. Mistress doesn't like to be kept waiting. Humiliated beyond belief, I left the room and answered my summons. The bell rang again as I went, so I hurried, panting a little when I arrived. Ellen sat behind the large desk in her office. What took you so long? She said impatiently, then as if just seeing me. My goodness. How pretty you are. Been having fun with your cousins? I'm sorry, Ellen, I apologized, but these high heels slow me down a little bit. But you walk so well in them. Nobody would guess that you'd never worn ladies' shoes before. Her face took on a hint of reproach. But must say, I do hate to see women walking around with their hair in rollers. It's not ladylike at all. Ellen? Please? You keep talking to me as if I were a girl. Please? I'm not. And could you talk to Rose? She's starting to call me Miss Henry a lot. She's even doing it in front of Francis and Emily. Ellen waved her hand airily. I think you're being overly sensitive. I'll admit that I'm starting to see an improvement in your attitude as you drop these aggressive masculine tendencies you had. I don't remember having any. I started to complain. Henrietta, you're interrupting me. Now, you want to complain about Rose? Go and get her. Bring her to me. We'll get everything all straightened out. While you're at it, go into your closet, get the blue robe and gown, and change into them. Gown? Yes. Nightgown, nightdress, whatever you want to call it. I want to see how you look in that outfit. All right? There was beginning to be more than a trace of impatience in her voice. I looked down at my pretty slippers. Yes, dear, I said obediently. Then get Rose to get your hair out of these damn rollers. Once that's done, you can come back with her. I'll talk to you both then. Will that be all right, Henrietta? Then she smiled sweetly at me. You don't mind me calling you by a girl's name, do you? Please say you're not offended. I'm not offended, Ellen. It's okay, I said meekly. Then run along like a good girl and do as Mummy told you. She turned her attention back to some papers on her desk. Quickly, I hurried from the room. I was in two minds as I returned to our bedroom. On one hand, I knew I'd obviously annoyed her by complaining of how she was treating me. Now she was actually referring to me as a girl, had even effeminized my name. I knew it was all my fault and tried desperately to think of a way to get back into her good graces again. On the other hand, it now appeared that Rose was to get her comeuppance. That'll teach her to boss me around, I thought happily. Rose and the girls had left the bedroom, for which I was grateful. Blushing furiously, although nobody was there to see me, I put on the powder blue nightgown and robe that were hanging in my closet. There were no boxy shapes on this outfit. The nightgown bodice was of embroidered satin, with a rounded scoop neckline and short puffy chiffon sleeves. I now saw what everyone had been saying about my arms, they were rather pretty. There was some kind of built-in bra, but it was quite soft, so not uncomfortable, actually seemed to contain the soft breasts that my chocolate diet was helping to form. The skirt was, again, layers of chiffon that belled out from the waist. Not as long as the robe I'd just taken off. I discovered that the skirt of the nightgown swirled quite nicely when I walked. The robe complemented the gown beautifully. Mostly chiffon, but with two satin inserts at the front. It tied with a full sash, which I took great pains to tie into a pretty bow. It dawned on me that if Ellen liked the way I looked, she might not be upset with me anymore. "Oh, there you are," I heard Rose say. "How pretty you are, Miss Henry." I turned too quickly in a hurry to speak my mind. "And such a pretty swirl too. Been practicing?" She laughed. "Ellen wants to speak to you," I said spitefully. "About what?" she asked. "About you calling me Miss Henry. It's got to stop. I retorted. Her face darkened. You went tattling to the mistress about me? Trying to get me in trouble? As she talked, she came right up to me and grabbed my shoulders. Started shaking me. I have had just about enough of you, she gritted through her teeth. Going to teach you a lesson? I grappled with her, and was given a dreadful surprise. She was soft and girlish. Her uniform was satiny smooth, her lace apron and cap accentuated her femininity, but all of a sudden I knew who was actually playing the female role in our little contest. My arms were pretty, soft and weak and helpless against her. My breasts strained against the bra in another indication of my womanliness. My chiffon skirts floated around my smooth hairless legs. Squeaking and squealing my fear and outrage, I was pushed over to the dressing table. There she picked up a hairbrush. Then, weakening by the minute, I was forced over to the bed. With practically no effort on her part now, she sat down and arranged me over her knees. Please don't spank me, I sobbed. Please, Rose? You've been a naughty girl, haven't you? She asked. Yes, Rose. I'm sorry I spoke to Ellen about you. Yes, and you're going to be sorrier, she replied. With that, she pulled my layers of protective clothing away to bare my backside. Quickly, she applied the hairbrush with 6 stinging blows. She then let me up to my feet. Weeping more with the indignity of the event than the actual pain, I wasn't aware of leaving the room with her. Then I realized that we were walking along the hall. Suddenly I remembered. Rose? I'm sorry. I forgot to tell. Ask you if you would take the rollers from my hair? Ellen said. That's okay. Let's go to my room. We'll do it there, she said, kindly enough. When we got to her room, she opened up her closet. A lot of silky, satiny, uniforms of different colors hung there. I have such pretty uniforms, don't you think? She asked. Oh yes, Rose. I hurried to agree. Then let me ask you something. Do you feel that I'm more powerful than you now? She asked. Oh yes. Then, don't you think you should serve me? I don't understand, I said. You will, she replied, then added, I really like that outfit. Can I try it on? Oh yes, Rose, I replied. Want to go back to my bedroom? Whatever for? She asked. So I can get something else to wear. Silly, she laughed. I've got tons of clothes here that'll fit you just perfectly. Panties and a bra and a slip, of course. A garter belt to hold up your stockings. What else could you possibly want? I was filled with consternation. She wanted me to dress in women's clothes. No comments about how masculine they were, no excuse I could use to convince myself that I wasn't being feminine. Please, Rose? Don't make me wear your clothes. She didn't answer, just opened up a pair of black satin panties with lots of lace. Stooped down in front of me. Lift your gown and robe and step into these. Come on now. Almost weeping with shame, I did as she told me. Stood obediently as she pulled the panties up under my gown until they were positioned properly. I heard and felt the elastic snap into place. Then she proceeded to disrobe completely in front of me, finally standing completely nude. I couldn't help but look. She was gorgeous. Her skin was smooth and had a slight olive tint. Her breasts weren't big but were well formed with an observable uplift, even with her bra removed. Well then, get that robe and gown off. Like a nice little bunny now there. That's a girl. Seconds later, she was resplendent in my robe and gown while I stood shivering in my black satin panties. Now, don't I look nice? She asked me. Oh yes, I agreed. The color suits you. How nice of you to say that, she said. Now let's get the rest of your undies on. See how you like them. Here, hold your arms out and we'll get your bra on. And I did everything she asked as she put my bra, slip, garter belt and mesh stockings on me. She teased me a little because my bra didn't need much padding. It was tight and uncomfortable, but it actually uplifted my little breasts until they actually showed some cleavage. She showed me how to adjust the straps on the bra, slip, and garter belt so the fit would be perfect. Then she had me sit down as she took the rollers from my hair and brushed it out. I looked at my girlish reflection in the mirror. High arched eyebrows, hair waving almost to the shoulders and framing an oval face. Rose said. I think I did a nice job. Like it? Oh yes, Rose, I answered. Don't sound too happy about it, do we? She said cheerfully. But just wait until you see what a little makeup can do. It was more than a little makeup, but a little while later there was no doubt as to the sex of the person looking back at me from the mirror. Scarlet, pouty lips, curled, mascaraed eyelashes, blue eyeshadow, darkened tapering eyebrows, cheeks just touched with blusher. Don't want to overdo it with this, Rose had said as she gently stroked my cheeks with the brush. Your skin tone is nice, but too much blusher can make a girl with your complexion look kinda tardy. Know what I mean? I had to nod in agreement. I didn't really know what she was talking about, but felt that arguing any point with the women in my life didn't pay. Okay, Miss Henry. My turn, she said, sitting on the makeup bench beside me. Upsy daisy. She handed me the hairbrush. My hair really doesn't need it, but I find that getting it brushed relaxes me. So be a good girl? Standing there in my lingerie, I proceeded to do what she wanted by brushing her hair. After a few minutes she looked into the mirror and spoke to me. You've got nice soft hands. A little more practice at this and you'll be really good. Betcha. Then she paused. I'll have to think up another name for you though Henry doesn't cut it. What do you think? You mean a girl's name? I asked tremulously. Of course. What else? Ellen gave me one already, I told her. She did. Funny, she never told me. It was just a little while ago, when she sent me to get you. So, what is your new name? Henrietta. She made a little tooting noise with her lips. Not very original, but... At that point she paused, then smiled brightly. You did take French at school, didn't you? Yes. It was one of my best subjects. Why do you ask? I replied. She may have had a stroke of genius calling you Henrietta. It's a perfect name for a French maid. She leaned further back in her chair. Curtsy for me and say oui, mademoiselle. I made a stab at it, blushing in total humiliation. Not bad for a first time. Now do it again, but put your right foot behind your left, and curtsy a little deeper. Most important, give me a nice pretty smile when you do. Go ahead then. And she made me work at my curtsying technique and smile until she was satisfied. You've almost convinced me that you're happy doing that. How'd you like to try on one of my uniforms? That way, when you curtsy you'll create the perfect picture. But Ellen? I think she'll be mad if we take too much longer. Desperately seeking an excuse, any excuse to get back into my robe and nightgown. I think you should refer to Ellen as Madam now. It's a lot more appropriate. Don't you agree? Oui, mademoiselle, I said, curtsying. She beamed at me and got up from the bench and walked to her closet. How cute! Let's get a uniform for you, eh? Ah yes, she pulled a royal blue uniform out, removing the hanger as she did so. Then she held it at both shoulders, lifting it for my approval. Isn't this lovely? Just wait until you feel how taffeta sounds when you walk, you'll love it. Then she opened up the back of the dress and had me step into it. I knew what she meant about the noise of the material as she pulled it up around my body before fastening me in. There was a sort of silky crackling noise that seemed inordinately loud any time I so much as shifted from one foot to another. To tell the truth, I found it to be quite exciting. As I said, it was royal blue, with a square-cut neckline and short, feminine, puffy sleeves. The hem of the dress fell about calf length. The neckline, sleeves, and hem were all trimmed with a small ruffle of white material that gave a deep contrast to the dress color. I wasn't surprised when she put the serving apron over my head and tied it at the back with an extravagant bow. I winced though, when she pinned the final touch onto my hair, the lacy, beribboned maid's cap. Come and brush my hair some more, she said softly. Maybe you'll feel better now that you're properly dressed for the part. And she was right. There was no indication now that I was anything other than a personal maid, working on my mistress's hair. Slowly, I became more comfortable, both with what I was doing and being. When she'd started with me in her room, I'd been hoping to satisfy her, then return to my own clothes. I knew now that this was going to be highly unlikely, but was starting to accept that any voice I had in what she was going to do with me was minimal. "Like this room, do you?" she asked. I looked around, taking in the feminine drapes and furniture, the bright window looking out over the garden through French doors, the attached bathroom only a portion of which was visible. "Oui, mademoiselle. Very pretty," I said, becoming more and more capable in the role she had given me. "It's really highly unusual for a maid to get a suite of rooms like this, isn't it?" she asked. "Now that you mention it, mademoiselle, it probably is." She smiled. "That's enough, Henrietta. Put the brush down. Let's go and talk to madam. Shall we?" I gave a small bob, then did as she had told me, following her along the hall to Ellen's office. She didn't knock, just opened the door and stuck her head in. "Hi, sweetie," she said. Then, taking a hold of my arm, she pulled me into the office behind her. "What are you doing in that get-up?" "I bought it for him," Ellen said. "Oh." She pissed me off a little, so I gave her a little spanking, Rose answered easily. After I'd done that, couldn't see much sense in following the schedule. To tell the truth, I think she was ready for it. Right, Henrietta? I gave a bright smile. Curtsied. "Oui, mademoiselle," I answered, though I'd no real idea of what she was talking about. "My God! A French maid! Oh, you devil!" Ellen laughed and going over to Rose, embraced her. They then kissed. Full on the lips and for a long time. They finally stopped but, keeping an arm around each other, turned to face me. "You don't mind me kissing another woman, do you, Henrietta?" Ellen asked. "Mais non, madam," I said. "You see? Rose and I have been friends for a long time. But see, we kinda like having a man around at times. One all nice and soft and girlish, it's stupid probably, but we both like a man's equipment to be available to us occasionally. When you hired me, I sensed that you were exactly what we needed, so we set up this little play. You don't mind, I trust," she added sweetly. "Non, madam. Very good. So effective immediately, you can take over Rose's job and room. She'll take over yours. Isn't that nice?" "Oui, madam. Just one thing, Henrietta. I did say that, Rose, and I like your equipment." I didn't know what was expected, so did a quick bob. "Well, you need a few little modifications. Tonight, you'll shave everything down there. Everything, understand?" "Oui, madam. Then you'll powder yourself there and put a little perfume on as well." She turned to Rose. "Shalimar?" Rose nodded and spoke to me. "There's both powder and perfume in your new bathroom. You can use them." "Thank you, mademoiselle. And from now on, you'll be shaved, powdered and perfumed down there at all times. Understand?" Ellen said firmly. I nodded and curtsied. "I think we should tell her about her cousins," Rose said. Ellen bit her bottom lip, smiled sympathetically at me. "Yes. I guess so." Then she thought for a second or two before continuing. "Francis and Emily? They're not really your cousins. They are related to you, but it's a more distant relationship than that. See, their grandmother got shafted by your grandfather both sexually and financially many years ago. As a matter of fact, a large part of your estate should by all rights be theirs. They don't really want that though. What they want is you." "Me, madam?" "Yes. It's quite strange actually. They're girls. Absolutely no doubt about that. At the same time, they want to revenge themselves on your family by doing to you what your grandfather did to their grandmother." At my puzzled look, she added, "Screw you. Make you into their ideal girl. They've bought dildos and have been gradually finding out what to do with them for the last few weeks. Now, here's the thing. I've pretty well told them that they're welcome to your backside just as long as they leave the main equipment for Rose and me. With you all sweet and girlish in your maid's uniforms, I don't know if they'll be able to keep their hands off you. So? Tell you what. Why don't you run along? Tell them that Rose and I would like their company for dinner. She looked at the clock on her desk and shook her head. That means that you'll have 3 hours to come to some arrangement with them. Don't cry if they tear your pretty uniform or underwear, there's lots more. I stood, transfixed in horror. She took 2 of the maid's bells from the mantel shelf. Here. Take these with you. One for Francis, one for Emily. That way you'll know when they want you. Now, off with you, like a good girl. Rose and I have some catching up to do. Oui, madam, I said, unsure at the note of excitement in my voice. Couldn't help taking the pretty material of my dress in both hands and curtsying. But I don't think either Ellen nor Rose noticed as they were otherwise engaged.